Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Mayor's Big Bus Chat, conversation with West Yorkshire Bus Alliance. My name's Dave Pearson, Director of Transport and Property Services here at the Combined Authority. And over the next hour, we hopefully will talk you through where we are with our bus service improvement plan, and we will have an opportunity for you to hear from our panelists, and also for you to pose questions which we can answer as we go along. So we'll be doing this for an hour, and we'll wrap up at 7 o'clock. So hopefully you'll stick with us. But I'm going to start by introducing the panelists that we have with us today, and I'm going to invite Andrew McGuinness first to introduce himself. Andrew.
Thank you, Dave, and evening, everybody. My name is Andrew McGuinness. I'm Regional Manager for CPT, which is the trade body for bus and coach operators, and also I'm Chair of the West Yorkshire Bus Operators Association. Thanks, Andrew. And next up is Brandon.
Hello there. Good evening, everybody. My name is Brandon Jones, and I work for the bus operator first across West Yorkshire. And I'm looking forward to sharing my thoughts with everyone this evening, and also answering any questions that people have too. So thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Brandon. And Councillor Carlisle.
Thanks. Good evening, everyone. I'm Councillor Peter Carlisle. I'm a councillor from Leeds, but I'm here as Deputy Chair of the West Yorkshire Transport Committee, and I'm the Deputy Chair with responsibility for bus. So as part of that, I chair the West Yorkshire Bus Alliance.
Okay, thank you. And then there's Helen.
Thank you, Dave. Hello, everybody. I'm Helen Ellerton. I'm Interim Head of Transport Policy at West Yorkshire Combined Authority, and a lot of the work that you'll hear about in the coming few minutes has come out of my team. So it'd be good to hear some of the questions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Helen. So we'll move into a little bit of presentation, just a scene setting, really, in terms of what we're about to talk about, and hopefully that'll whet your appetite for posting some questions into us. But just a little bit of housekeeping to start with. So this is being recorded and will be made available online to watch at a later date. So as we said before, you can submit questions to us via the Q&A chat box on your screen, and we'll sort of hold those questions in terms of the answers for later on. So there'll be an opportunity for us to discuss the points you make. If the whole thing sort of falls over and crashes and burns and we can't fix it, then we'll schedule this and do it again. But this is the second one we've done, and the first one was fine, and this one seems to be going good. Well, pretty well so far as well. So we'll go off. If you require more information, then we can organise sort of further sessions and further sort of information and clarifications to you. So if you want to come back to us, if there's some particular points you want a more detailed response on. So that's basically how we're going to do it over the next 55 minutes or so. But let's just start with what the West Yorkshire Bus Alliance is, and just to give you a little bit of context in that sense. What we did back in 2019 was establish a legal voluntary partnership agreement between the Combined Authority, the 5 district councils in West Yorkshire, and the local bus operators. And the theme of that really was to agree and make progress on the things that we can work together on. There are lots of things which I'm sure we'll talk about later on this evening, where we need to do more and we need to change the way in which we do things. But we can also do the things that do happen now in terms of just work collaboratively between the public sector and the private sector to do the things we can change, and that was the sort of ethos of how we established the alliance. And so the sort of things that we have done, we work together on. We now have a uniform set of bus fares for under 19s, and that reduced the price of a number of different tickets, and it's aimed at encouraging young people to travel on the bus more. We did that last year. We've refitted over 400 buses to enable them to comply with clean air zone requirements. These are diesel buses with extra equipment to reduce the harmful emissions that come from the buses. And we've managed a process of, between us and the bus operators, of cleaning up the emissions from diesel buses. And then throughout the pandemic, we worked very closely together. And it was a very strange time where, you know, we had to reduce some services at some times, bring those services back. And one of the things we did do is working together, and you'll see them on the real-time information screens, a system which will tell you how busy the bus is before it arrives. And I think we believe we're the first place in the country to have actually done that. So that was all collaborative working, which we were able to do. We want to take it to the next step, and to continue to work very closely between all the parties to improve things for bus passengers now. And so we're establishing something called an enhanced partnership, which is a little bit more of a legal partnership to deliver through our bus service improvement plan. So I'm going to hand over to Helen, who's going to talk us through the bus service improvement plan.
Thank you, Dave. So as Dave was saying, the bus service improvement plan was published in October last year. This was something we had to do via what was released as the National Bus Strategy by government in March 2021. But what the bus service improvement plan gave us an opportunity to do was set the vision for bus in West Yorkshire, we took the opportunity for. We have been through this process, and we were awarded £69 million by government to support the delivery of the BSIP, which was a successful outcome, and not every area across the country received funding. We could have the next slide, please. Thank you. So our vision that we set in our bus service improvement plan was set around kind of 3 themes: around a safe and inclusive bus system, better connected communities, and greener travel. We were really keen to make sure that we could make bus the first choice of travel in West Yorkshire, make a financially sustainable bus service, and improve the delivery of buses to provide the passengers with a service that they can feel confident in using. So in all round kind of an offer that meant that people wanted to use the bus as their first mode of choice. Improve connectivity for communities, especially those in deprived areas, and kind of help the bus service to connect other forms of transport, so providing an integrated transport offer. Our bus service improvement plan use these objectives and set this vision to basically set a plan for how we would try and deliver a number of customer outcomes. So could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So basically, in our setting of our action plan we set it across 5 kind of delivery areas. First of all, like a better bus network that is inclusive, that makes basically wanted to take people where they need to go and when they need to go, so early mornings, late evenings. Making a clear and simple fare structure, so making it easy to use and more affordable and accessible, and people can, it's clearer from a ticketing and a fares perspective. Also improving, so more kind of inclusive customer service and support, so providing enhancements to tools all around travelling on the bus to enable it for easier to people to plan their journeys, and then also have information available to them when they're on their journey. And then making their journeys more reliable and quicker by improving priority for buses on our roads, and making it a much cleaner journey all round, with a greater number of buses that were greener, zero emission, electric or otherwise. Next slide, please. So we basically did this by visualizing and utilizing the journey across the process. So thinking about before you travel and how you log on to the app and the website to find basically up-to-date travel information and details of routes and time and cost to be able to plan a journey. And then when you're at the bus stop, kind of what information do you need at the bus stop to help your journey, and be that kind of coordination around kind of real-time information or better access to other connecting information on different modes of technology. And then enabling you to then move up, so board onto the bus and pay, and making sure that the buses are all accessible, and you can use a range of methods to be able to pay to get on the bus and still get the best price available for your trip. Next slide, please. And then whilst you're on the bus, being able to take the opportunity to kind of sit down and have and spend some time doing whatever you want to do. So having access to the Wi-Fi, but also having onboard information, so audio visual information, and mobile phone journey planning, for example, to your hand, and being able to enjoy your journey. And then by the end of your journey, basically getting to the destination, the passenger may want to have a change of service, so integrating to different services, as well as having opportunities to kind of plan your onward travel from there. So having a full journey experience. And then after your journey, we're thinking about kind of what the person does next. Is there an opportunity to improve the journey, and can you utilize that to basically retain and attract new passengers going forward? So thinking about the journey from a whole journey experience. Okay, the next slide, please. So there's a number of things we included in our bus service improvement plan, some quick wins, if you like, and some longer term interventions. One of the things in there that we are doing starting on the 4th of September, so on Sunday, is around improvements to our fares offers. So we are reducing our M card, so our Metro card, down from £5.50 to £4.50. So providing essentially a reduced daily cap for travel. But we are also introducing a £2 kind of maximum fare for all single journeys. So this enables you to travel across West Yorkshire on a single journey for a maximum of £2. This builds on kind of our fares, a young person's fares offer that Dave was talking about earlier, to allow for travel for 19 to 25s, and a label improvements for young people. Can I have the next slide, please? We are also our bus service improvement plan is talking around the network and improving and making sure we're better connecting communities. So within that, we've developed kind of a 5-year plan of local bus network. So working through kind of improving what's called our core network. So where we have improve a frequency of 15 minutes or better, improving kind of the regularity and consistency of less frequent services, and also making sure you can access a bus in the early morning and the later in the evening to improve opportunities for people who have caring responsibilities, for example, and are working on shift working. We're also looking to improve our services in our rural and out of town areas, where we can improve connectivity through a range of different potentially options related to the bus service. Next slide, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Helen. What we wanted to do now is just to have a little bit of a discussion around with our panelists, really, around the bus service improvement plan that Helen's just talked us through. And so I'll start with the bus operator colleagues first, and a sort of perspective from you, Brandon, to start with, in terms of the bus service improvement plan and how you see it from a bus operator's perspective.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Dave. I think it's a really exciting opportunity. It's a new opportunity. We've got, as you've explained through the Alliance, an established partnership already in place. And I think that gives us a lot of confidence as we move forward into the enhanced partnership and the delivery of this plan, because we've got all of the necessary people and organisations already working closely together successfully. So that's not just the operators and the combined authority, but our local authority partners, and also partners like Transport Focus, so giving as an input from the customer's perspective as well. So I think the established partnership gives us a lot of confidence. I think the plan also reflects well on the key areas that have been highlighted as well in this plan, but also by customers, around simplifying fares, improving information, providing more reliable services and, of course, greener services too. So I think it reflects what customers are telling us, and it's also being delivered by an established partnership, and I think that's the right way forward. It is a great opportunity, and I think it will also help demonstrate, the role that the bus can play as we move forward. We've got some challenges, as people will be aware, with cost of living and decarbonisation, and I think the plan gives us that opportunity to help tackle those issues and really help drive the economy forward as well. So yeah, it's a great opportunity, and we as operators are looking forward to getting stuck in.
Thanks, Brandon. Andrew, do you want to add into that?
Thanks, Dave. Basically, everything that Brandon said, but I would also add, I've just scribbled down 3 particular points: improving the overall journey experience, making it the best and highest quality and greenest it can possibly be, with information, with real-time information, where you've got onboard facilities such as charging. Again, that's great. Reliable journey times, so the priority to get buses moving quicker and more efficiently. And again, we'll make buses more efficient, then it gives us more options and more ability, and they're more attractive to new users. But finally, I think on the fares initiative, on the Mayor's Fares, for example, bus operators try and make fare systems as easy and straightforward as possible. But however, if you haven't used the bus for 20 or 30 years, and we're trying to encourage modal shift, that's why we're trying to encourage motorists onto the bus, we need to demystify that, and we need to make buses as accessible as possible. So that's £2 maximum fare, or the £4.50 daily cap. Very, very simple, very, very easy to understand. And Mayor's Fares has a nice ring to it as well. So yeah, I think demystifying, improving the overall journey experience and making it as simple as possible. And I would say the plan is very ambitious.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. Councillor Carlin, do you want to come in here?
Yeah, I can. I mean, I'll add from our side, really, it's important to look at the plan and know that it's been built from kind of a range of feedback that's come in, both to the Combined Authority and from operators, and we've been able to pull all that together because we've got the operators around the table with what they hear from their customers every day, as well the information the Combined Authority get, and that certainly myself as a councillor get all the time. This seems to fit all the queries and concerns that I get over our bus network. I mean, in Leeds, I know the figures, I'm sure they're similar across West Yorkshire, but there's almost a third of residents in Leeds don't have access to a car. So it's important that those people are given the service they need, but also looking at where we need to be. As Andrew says, really, we need those people on a bus that aren't currently using the bus, to increase the patronage in order to improve the service and to improve the sustainability of the service. But also, when you look at the issue of the climate emergency, it's important to do that as fast as possible and to start working towards this as soon as possible. So I'm really excited that this is moving forward, and there's some really big aims in, and the first one about the fares coming up very shortly is a really promising first step on this partnership.
Okay, thank you. I think if we move to the next question, and just to remind people online, and I might have said it wrong earlier, is that if you want to post a question, use the Q&A section, and we've got a few questions lined up, which we'll come to in a few minutes, but just encourage people to do that if they've got questions that they want to address. But the second question for the panel really is, what do you think the biggest challenges facing the West Yorkshire Bus Services, and what we can do to tackle them? And I'll probably go to Councillor Carlyle first, if I may, put you on the spot in terms of challenges, and I'll move to the operators after that.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, happy to. I think, I mean, as a councillor across one of the areas of the city, and I'm hearing from councillor colleagues, we know that frequency, reliability and consistency consistency of the network are the big struggles for people who currently use the bus, and the big reasons people give for why they feel they can't shift from their car. And this gives us an opportunity to change those. But it is important to note that post-pandemic, we're still only up to around 80% of patronage on buses. So we were looking to improve the network we had before that, but that's put a kind of extra spanner in the works for where we were heading towards. So it's even more important, I think, to get this right. But I think one of the biggest challenges that we've got across West Yorkshire is there's a network that's grown over time from disparate operators that haven't necessarily always been working as closely together as we are now, and built up from the needs of private operators with the intervention from the Combined Authority whenever we can to try and stabilise that. And this sees us moving towards having more flexibility and control of working together as a partnership to identify that network that West Yorkshire needs, and to try and bring that all together. So I think that's the main thing that I think people will see improvements on in that, is how this working together can lead to a more coherent and cohesive bus network that hopefully serves more people better and serves more areas.
Okay. Thanks for that. Andrew, do you want to come in with challenges?
Thanks, Dave. I think COVID recovery is currently top of the list. So, as Councillor Carlisle mentioned, we're anywhere between 75% and 90%, even on warm weather days. So we're seeing quite a return on when the weather's good. People choose to be in the office. People choose to be travelling. Older people we've seen, as we all know collectively, are taking longer to return. So what we see is concessionary travellers are making the journeys they have to. They're making the medical appointments. They're going shopping. They're seeing family. But the nice trip into Leeds, or the nice trip to Otley, to go out and have a tea in the scone, for example, as I call it, the discretionary travel, that isn't happening. And again, work patterns link into that as well. So again, I think the more we can do to promote bus positively is good. That's point 1 of 4. I would say traffic. With more traffic, again, it's that vicious circle of buses take longer, they're less attractive, they're more expensive to run if they're stuck in traffic. So again, if we can prioritise buses, great. The cost of living, bus operators and businesses aren't immune to that. I mean, the cost of raw materials, buses are made out of materials which are skyrocketing in cost. The energy costs are increasing, driver cost is increasing as well, and there's the driver shortage, and there's a lot been happening around that in West Yorkshire specifically. But finally, the last point I would make is I just am desperate for a stable period for bus services. I mean, we are going to look at an ambitious bus service improvement plan. I am looking at that stable period, then leading into growth. But if you look at the last 2.5 years with COVID, and if you look at the headlines in local press, we've gone from changes to the network, people don't use buses, we've got a great bus service improvement plan. And for ourselves in the industry and wider colleagues who are on here, we understand all of that, the reason why the political landscape, the funding landscape has changed. But as a passenger, it must be very confusing to listen to all those messages. So that stable period where we can all focus on growth and focus on the positive things moving forward.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. Brandon, anything to add?
I think there's been an awful lot of good points made there, and I'll add to it really with a couple of things really. I think one is some of the points that have been highlighted there just really reinforce the importance of bus over the next few months and years, particularly as we come out of this COVID period. Bus operators, like a lot of other industries, are having to adapt. So in some cases that means ticketing has to be a bit more flexible. It also means that we've got to go out and attract more people onto bus, perhaps people who haven't necessarily used the bus often before. And I think that's some of the challenges we've got is around informing and changing some of those perceptions around bus. There are some really good examples around West Yorkshire of what has been done. I think we all recognise there's still a lot to do. and we know there are some improvements needed to really get that growth that we all need. But we should also recognise there are some very good examples of bus services that have been provided really well with great services and fast bus priority, and then good information and good bus station and infrastructure that people can use to use services. So I think some of this is around making sure that we can tackle those challenges by promoting what is good and then really reinforcing what's doing well, so that we can improve services and change some of that perception. So for me, it's just around perception and making sure that we can continue to promote and sell the service, and then make sure we inform people and sell it, because I think the product is good, and I think it can get even better.
Okay, thanks, Brandon. I'm going to spend the next 20 minutes or so sort of talking about some of the questions that have been posted in the Q&A section, and feel free to continue to do that. And I'm going to start with the question that Mark Parry's asked, and then I'll probably pass to Brandon to ask a supplementary question that Mark has posted. But Mark's first question is about rumours of possible service withdrawals from October, and I think it's probably just worth my sort of spending a minute or two just explaining where that came from and what's going to happen next. I mean, I think as has been mentioned a few times, I think Andrew in particular sort of made reference to it, is that the changing travel patterns that have happened, and I think Councillor Carlin sort of made reference to the fact that the numbers of passengers are not back to 2019 levels, means that throughout the whole pandemic, bus services have been funded by a combination of funding support from local and national government, and that funding support was due to come to an end in the beginning of October, and bus operators up and down the country, not just in West Yorkshire, were flagging that if that were to happen, then they would have to reduce some of the things they do to match the reduced income that's coming through. Government has now extended that funding, and so that staves off some of the effects of that. But I think we're still in a very live situation, and our bus operator colleagues can probably elaborate on this in terms of difficulties in terms of recruiting staff and other challenges in the system. But I think what that does is the whole scale sort of service withdrawals up and down the country from October has been abated a little, but I think we're still in very difficult financial times, and so hopefully that addresses the generality of that. But I'm going to come to you, Brandon, now to Mark's other question about restoring frequencies on routes, which I think is a sort of part of the post-pandemic current sort of scenario that everybody's facing in terms of operating bus services. So, Brandon, do you want to come in on that particular point?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Dave, and good evening, Mark. So a number of our particularly more frequent routes across West Yorkshire are running at slightly reduced frequencies, perhaps compared to where they were pre-pandemic. And there have been a couple of reasons. Dave has clearly pointed out the post-pandemic demand is still very different to what it was pre-pandemic. Saying that, there are certain times of day and days of the week where we are actually seeing quite different variations, particularly at the weekends. So we are adapting our network where we can and monitoring it very closely. Another reason why some of our frequencies have adapted is because of the national driver shortage. And I think in a minute it might be helpful just to pick up from Andrew on what we've been doing as a collective with the Combined Authority and the Alliance and all the operators to try and attract more people to apply for bus driving roles. But that has created certainly a squeeze on our flexibility and our capability in terms of driver resource. The situation is much more stable than it was So that is a positive, but the issue has not gone away. And at the moment, the answer to question Mark has raised is that we're monitoring these routes very, very closely. And where we are able to, for example, change bus type, where we might have certain levels of demand with double decks rather than singles, or adjust frequencies where we can, we will do, because we certainly don't want to be leaving people behind. But we're also very conscious as well that we don't want to switch on frequencies too early when we don't have the resources in place to deliver that, because I think worse than putting frequencies back in place would be having to cancel trips because of the driver availability issue, which, as I say, is a lot more stable, but there are still a number of issues there, and we're working very hard to address it. So it might be worth, Dave, that Andrew just picks up the bit around what we're doing in terms of as a collective to try and attract more people to the bus driving roles, as well as things like pay rates. That there's a lot of other activity going on.
Okay, Andrew, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Thanks, Brandon. So last year, the mayor was very interested in the driver shortage, and had organised a round-table session with operators to look to see what she could do as an elected mayor. But in reality, the levers that the mayor has in driver shortages were somewhat limited. But we did quote a scheme that Tees Valley Combined Authority had funded, which was actually a coach driver training scheme. And the issue we have is there's a driver shortage across the country at the moment, where around, on average, 7 to 8% short across the country. And we're also seeing other driving industries such as HGV and, for example, supermarket workers have been short as well. Hospitality workers have seen shortages. So we're not immune to that. So the mayor and the Combined Authority have funded a scheme called Route to Success. And what that is, it's a pre-training scheme of 2 weeks. It's a pipeline of 400 people who will learn about basic skills, English, maths, customer service skills, virtual reality headsets, believe it or not, to see how to drive a bus. And then at the end of stage one, candidates have one of two options. They can either go towards the main operators like First Arriva and Transdev with their own inbuilt training facility, or there's 75 places that'll be funded all the way through the license for smaller operators, and smaller operators don't usually have their own inbuilt training capability. So instead of seeing adverts from a dozen different operators all competing, you may still see them, in fairness. What you will see is lots and lots of positive work about the Route to Success, which is a funded scheme. I'd encourage, if anyone's interested, have a look at that. And again, will that solve the driver shortage in West Yorkshire overnight? No. Does it give the ability, the means, the extra support to do that over the coming months? Absolutely. So I think the mayor and the Combined Authority should be commended for throwing support behind this, and all operators of all sizes are working very, very positively with the training provider on this.
Thanks, Andrew. Moving on to the questions, we have one about when will the rest of West Yorkshire have cleaner buses? I think I mentioned in the introduction, we've been able to refit 400 diesel buses with cleaner emission technologies. We have electric buses on a route in Leeds and on the park and ride routes, and we have plans for more electric buses. So I'm going to bring Helen in initially to talk us through the where we are with the next wave of electric buses, and then I'm going to bring Councillor Carlisle in terms of the sort of wider aspirations in terms of air quality and zero carbon. But Helen, do you want to talk us through the electric buses, please?
Yeah, thank you, Dave. So we were successful last year. We were successful with in the Zero Emission Bus Regional Area Fund. This will enable us, in partnership with the operators, to essentially convert about 100 and just short of 120 buses across West Yorkshire to electric, and we're hoping to start rolling these out within the next 18 months. These buses will mainly be in Wakefield, Leeds and Bradford, and then we have some buses that we intend to fund through our own money in Kirklees and Calderdale. In addition to that, we also have about 28 million or of that ilk within our city region sustainable transport settlements bid, where we to convert another number of buses to electric across West Yorkshire. So it's only a small proportion, but it will convert up to about 10% of the fleet in West Yorkshire to zero emission. As I say, it's a small contribution, but it is definitely a start.
Okay, thanks, Helen. And I think it is a start, and to convert the bus fleet eventually to electric requires investment by bus operators, investment by the public sector, and a long-term plan. I think is and it is a start. But we do, I think, all recognise that there's quite a long way to go in that. I don't know whether, Councillor Carlisle, you want to talk about the wider zero carbon targets that we have across the region as well.
Yeah, I can come in on that, and I mean it's one of the really important bits. I guess it's important to say that there's a couple of aims you can have in terms of the bus, because switching everyone onto the bus is still going to be a cleaner way of travel with the buses that we've got currently than everyone going their separate routes in their cars. So I guess we've got two-step. We're doing all we can as a combined authority, and we've obviously got clear targets for 2038 as the combined authority, but the separate districts have got their own targets as well in order to come down to net zero. But when you look at that across the area, there's a limited amount we can do as the combined authority, and we've started stemming out those electric buses where we can. I think Brandon, as I mentioned, the park and ride earlier on, and I guess we've got Sturton as well, I think the UK's first all-electric park and ride, where in fact the solar panels on there end up charging the facility and the buses that run the routes, and that's a really important step to show just how powerful these electric buses can be. That's really important, but as well as we increase the patronage on buses through these improvements we make, there's more money then in the bus network to encourage private operators to be able to switch those vehicles as well. So I think there's a period of time where we'll see that really get to a spiraling moment where we're seeing all the new buses being electric. At the moment, there's a huge difference in cost between a diesel bus and an electric bus. What we don't want to do is end up with fewer buses than we have at the moment, because as I am quite often reminded, there's not enough in many areas that people would like to see at the moment. But it is a long-term plan in order to get as many clean buses as we can at the moment, switch as many people to bus as we can, and then improve those buses as we go. So that's really where we get in that spiral. Okay,
thanks for that. I'm going to pick up a couple of questions myself in terms of the points that people were raising. I think Michael Jackson sort of asked a really good question about which app should we sort of direct people to in terms of integrated information and tickets. And I think it's a bit of a product of where we come from, that there are a number of different apps and things in play, as it were, and that in some respects the answer really is that you should be able to get information from any of them that's consistent. I think one of the most important things we're doing about the fares that we're introducing at the weekend is moving towards a sort of simplification of the fares, and one of the things I've been talking to colleagues about is how we can use the M-Card app and the WI Metro website, particularly to help people who don't know what the right tickets to buy and whether they should buy a single or whether they should buy a day ticket or a different type of product to suit their particular journeys. And I think we collectively can do more to help people with that. And if that information is consistent on the First app and on the M-Card app and that sort of thing, then wherever people go, if they get the same message and information, that's probably the most important sort of aspect of it. And again, picking up Michael's other question that he asked about the East Leeds Flexibus scheme. That's a trial, and we're sort of evaluating the trial. It's nearly through its first year next month, and I think as Michael's pointed out to us, it's been very popular, particularly for people getting to hospital appointments and other things. And that's basically where people use an app to book a shared minibus in the East Leeds area. Our bus service improvement plan has the scope to roll out demand responsive transport as the sort of jargony name for that type of service in other areas, and we're looking at where the best places to do that is taking the best learning we have done from East Leeds. There's probably a role for a form of that transport to be in some of our semi-rural areas, for example. So we do see that sort of service having a role in the future. So that I think that works. Hopefully we can get some more feedback. And then finally, I'll sort of pick the question out regarding bus routes generally. I think is the point that's made about connections from Featherstone to Leeds, and I think that's a general point that's true across different parts of different journeys people want to make. Is that in this particular example, an area where lots more houses have been built, and yet perhaps the bus service hasn't kept up with that. And I think one of the things we do need to do out the bus service improvement plan is to have a good long look at the bus network. As has been said by a number of people already, people are travelling in different ways after the pandemic. That it's not just because of COVID, it's because they might be working different ways, they might be making different types of journeys, that people's travel behaviours and practices have changed, and we do need to review the bus network so to make sure it's keeping up with that. And in particular, I think it's a point well made about areas where extra houses are being built. So I think that's a useful point. And finally, I'll just go through the questions and I'll bring some of the panelists back in. Alex Dowan has asked about the CT Plus routes. We are struggling to get bus operators to provide those services. The uncertainty about bus funding, which has now been clarified a little bit, I think has been part of that. We have got an operator lined up to do the Horsforth service, and so we should be able to resume that shortly. Some of the services in Huddersfield, we still don't have operators for, but we're back out to tender. And that sort of links into Michael Jackson's question about Access Bus has not collapsed. CT Plus, which is a company that went out of business, was providing the Access Bus service in Leeds and Wakefield, and we've now moved the buses, and we've commissioned an alternative operator who does actually provide the service in Bradford, Coldsey and Kirklees to provide the Leeds and Wakefield service. Unfortunately, the buses were in a pretty poor condition when we got them from CT Plus, so there have been quite a lot of cancellations, but we're beginning to get the service back up and running, and should be able to do lunch at clubs and things like that in the form in which they were travelling before. But we have had problems with Access Bus over the whole year, and it's fair to say CT Plus were not delivering the service we were paying them for particularly well, and they weren't looking after the buses, and that's been a bit of a problem for us. Moving back through the questions, Peter Stenilis has asked one about cancellations and general reliability. And I think that's been a theme of a number of questions that we've been having. And I just wondered whether, so Brandon, do you want to come back to that one? I know it picks up to one or two of the things you were saying earlier.
Yeah, I think it's an important question that we do tackle, because clearly our level of cancellations as a sector, not just in West Yorkshire, has not been at the level that we want. Ideally, we wouldn't cancel a service at all. It's the last resort. But we have been in this situation, and it, as Peter suggests, it is primarily led by driver availability, but not only that. And it's something we're working really hard to fix. Obviously, Andrew's touched on the recruitment side of things. We have where we can use resources and drivers and buses across the network to fill in any gaps. We do that. It can be more difficult on journeys which are harder to reach. So, for example, if a bus does run out of service at the far end of a service like Otley, it is harder to replace that journey, and sometimes it might be more likely that a journey like that would be cancelled because of that. But it is a last resort, and we're working really hard to minimise any cancellations. One thing we do to try and help that is to try and provide as much information as we can through the Combined Authority's real-time information system. So where there are cancellations, that they'll be communicated through the real-time at bus stops and through the West Yorkshire Combined Authority's website. That process will also be applying to our own app over the next few weeks as well. So at least people will be able to make better informed choices if incidents do occur. But clearly, it's not something that we want to deliver for our passengers. And clearly, we're working hard to make sure that we minimise any level of cancellations. Where it does occur, we do have an offer for customers, a customer guarantee that's been put in place through the Bus Alliance, actually, whereby anyone not satisfied with the journey can claim a full journey back through a day ticket, effectively, or if it's the last bus journey on a service that means there's no alternative, customers often would have to get a taxi, then that can be reimbursed through the Alliance customer guarantee as well. So it's clearly something we're working hard to avoid, but where it does happen, we do have that gesture of goodwill to say sorry, and for us to be able to focus on making sure it doesn't happen again. Thanks, Dave.
Okay. Thanks, Brandon. And Graham Hill's asked a question around training for people with disability, bus driver training to help people with disabilities. I don't know whether, Andrew, that's something you want to pick up on.
Yeah, I would say that all operators provide disability awareness training as part of the induction process. And also drivers go through so-called CPC training, Certificate of Professional Competence. So as part of the CPC training, there's one of the modules, for example, is accessibility. I think one thing we as operators appreciate is there is hidden disabilities. So in terms of accessibility, I think often it can be considered physical accessibility, but I think also things like the next stop announcements, audio visual is very important within that. I think one thing that passengers sometimes may need to do, especially with hidden disabilities, is I know you may have an issue with disclosing a disability, but if you need more time or need more assistance, don't be shy to ask the driver, especially for hidden disabilities. It's very important that the driver is aware. I don't think any of the panelists may be aware of this, but outside of work, I'm actually a trustee of the Newcastle Disability Forum. So I'm a trustee of a charity that specifically works in this area. So it might be a little bit more heightened to this than people may expect. But Brandon, I don't know if there's anything that you would add to that.
Thank you, Andrew. I think you're absolutely right. Training is really important. I think it's also really important that customers let operators know when we get it wrong, or the combined authority if it's say a travel shop or another facility at an interchange. When we get the information, we can use that and we can use it to improve services. In some cases, I know, having been personally involved, we've had feedback from customers around bus design, and from that feedback, design has been changed of interior of buses. So feedback's crucial. We can do something about it, and as Andrew says, our training is adapting all the time to make sure our services can be as accessible as possible for everybody.
Okay, thanks, Brandon. And just to add, from a combined authority point of view, I mean, one of our colleagues works very closely with groups that support people with disabilities, and in particular to sort of carry forward some, and we have had some really good ideas that we can carry forward into discussions with bus operators. We've also done quite a lot of work, particularly around new bus stations, for example, or the colour-coded network system that we've recently put into Leeds, about working with groups representing people with disabilities to build into what we do some of the feedback we get from them. And I think it's quite important that we do that. We have a legal obligation to do a quality impact assessment of things which we as a public sector body do to reflect the impact on people with protected characteristics. So there's quite a lot of work in that space that we're doing. Looking at the list of questions, and I'm just going to sort of start moving us towards sort of wrapping up. But Brandon, you were going to sort of address the hydrogen buses question, I think. That's something.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. By the way, I don't pretend to be an expert on alternative fuels here, but I can help provide a little bit further information on with this specific question. So it's quite an interesting period of time at the moment as technology evolves. The cost of electric vehicles that's been mentioned is already higher than a typical low emission diesel bus at the moment. Actually, across its full life, it's still, because of course you don't pay for the fuel like a diesel bus. Across its full life, it's still very close to the full cost of a diesel bus, if not still slightly higher. But that cost is coming down all the time. When you actually compare that to hydrogen is another level of cost. So although I think the question does suggest that hydrogen is cheaper, in terms of the actual vehicle itself and the infrastructure required, it's not a cheaper alternative as we currently speak right now. But saying that, we're not ruling out hydrogen, and in fact, in some parts of the country, there are some hydrogen bus trials in place right now. So the answer isn't only electric, but right now, electric is certainly, from an operator's perspective, is the path that we're on, because it does make most sense, but it might not necessarily be the right answer always.
Thanks, Brandon. And the supply of hydrogen is a key part of that as well, and it's not a very developed infrastructure for supplying hydrogen at the moment. Okay, thanks for that. I think that covers a lot of the questions that we've had. I was just going to sort of have a bit of a closing question really to our panelists, to sort of work through. If we can go to the next slide, is this is an exercise in listening to people, the Mayor's Big Bus Chat, as well as this webinar. We've been doing lots of face-to-face and online surveys. So how do you think the Mayor's Big Bus Chat can improve services? And I'll go to Helen first.
Thank you, Dave. I think it's really valuable that we listen to people from all groups to help understand the real issues that affect people in using the bus, and also hearing from non-bus users as well, so we can understand what needs to change to be able to encourage and grow patronage. And bringing these together, it can help form and shape what we do next, and where we prioritise the funding we do have, and how we manage the service going forward.
Okay, thanks, Helen. We'll move to our operator colleagues. And Andrew, do you want to go next?
Thanks, Dave. Brandon was talking earlier about the power of partnership, and I think part of that, the most important person or people in that partnership is our passengers, and also the wider population of West Yorkshire who currently don't use buses. So I think it's important that we hear, again, Brandon was talking about feedback before. I think it's very, very important that we get that feedback. We can't act on feedback if we don't have it. So it's important that we have that so we can act on it. And also, sometimes, you know, although there's lots of partnership work, again, we need to hear that direct voice, and bodies like Transport Focus and Bus Users UK do an excellent job at representing the passenger. Sometimes you just need to hear directly from the passengers. So very, very important to hear that, Dave.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Andrew. Brandon?
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, I'd summarise it up by saying this is a real opportunity to shape the plan. We know from other activities and work that we've done that by asking for feedback and getting that feedback, it can change, it does influence, it does make a difference. So I'd encourage everyone that's on this this webinar to complete the survey, but also to encourage others to complete the survey as well, have their say, and make sure that you get your input, because it does make a difference, and it will help improve the plan, which is what we all want to happen.
Thanks, Brandon. And I'm going to give the final word on this question to Councillor Carlisle.
Thank you, Dave. Yeah, I mean, when you look at it, I guess one of the questions that came up around, you know, which ticket app to use, for instance, and where to search for information, I think that shows a bit of, if you wanted to make an integrated, coherent transport network for West Yorkshire, you probably wouldn't start from where we are now, where you're starting it from scratch. But these things have come up over time, and it's part of our plan to make that coherent network and to really see what we need to do to get there. So it's really important to hear all that feedback. Now we have got this partnership that gives us the opportunity to actually make changes much beyond what we have previously. Just touching on the comment around people with disabilities, for instance, well, yeah, bus is extremely important for people with disabilities, with many disabilities, and making sure that the transport network is inclusive for all is a really important part of what we want to hear as well. But it is important, as Helen said, to hear from people that don't use the bus, because we need to increase that patronage, and we need to make sure we've got a sustainable service that improves for everyone. So really, I'd say any of the comments that come through this, they get added to what we already know to become part of, I guess, the mayor's and our brief for how we improve bus services for the changes we can make in this partnership now, or whatever changes we may want to make going forwards. So it's really important that we get all the comments in, we start planning out what that perfect network would be, and then we can plan out how we get there as part of this partnership.
Okay, thanks for that. I think that's a good call to action for everybody on this webinar who might be watching it back later, to get involved. We've got another couple of weeks, another week, I think, of the Big Bus Chat. It finishes on September the 11th. So there's a survey online. And you can use the online resources. We've had a number of different sessions, so I just sort of leaves for me to thank everybody for their participation, the panelists and those of you at home posting in questions, which are hopefully, I think we've gone somewhere to answer the queries that you've got. So I'll wish you all a very good evening, and thanks for your participation in the Mayor's Big Bus Chat. And hopefully you will see in future weeks and months the product of that, starting this coming weekend with our new Mayor's Fairs initiative. So have a good evening, everybody. Thank you.